and individuals that are on your team, and how important that kind of aspect was in the success of your company.
That aspect was huge for us. We couldn't do it ourselves, for sure. The support team, whether we're talking about our administrative staff, our assessment coordinators, our IT people, are all people who I think share a couple qualities that are really important for our success. One of those qualities is these people are reliable. Okay, we can count on them. Now, we practice what we preach, so we're an employment testing company, so we test everybody that we hire, and we hire people who are reliable. And as people retire or move on in their lives, we try to replace them with reliable people. But the other thing that these folks have that is so important is they are adaptable. So they're not just locked into one way of doing things. Nothing that we do here at PSP Metrics is the same as what we did 10 years ago. Everything has changed over time for lots and lots of reasons. And so you need people who can adjust, who can adapt. The vision is still the same. Okay? We're still trying to build competitive companies, but the way we go about doing that is so different than what it was 10 years ago. And it'll probably be different in the next 5 years, maybe in the next 3 years, because so we need people who, yes, we can count on, but we need people who can adjust and people who are adaptable. And that's really been, I think, one of the keys to success here is making sure that we bring those kind of people on board at all levels of the company.
Yeah. Well, I want to stick, with that a little bit, in this concept of building competitive companies, right? And you've been in the space for a number of years, and I know PSP has been around since 1946, right? So 75 years, of helping and answering this question of fit and helping build competitive companies. And so, for our listeners who are, building organizations, right, and thinking about, we're at a time where I believe the talent pool is deeper and wider than it's ever been, right? And so can you talk through the importance, right, when there's so much talent out there, of having a way to be able to identify that talent, and maybe even some tips on, steps that folks can take as they're thinking through, how do we actually make sure that the talent that we either currently have on the team is the best talent, right, in order for us to be competitive, and if that is the case, maybe secondarily, then also how do we go out into the market and identify individuals who are going to maybe increase the level of competitiveness that we can have in the market?
Well, you're singing my song right now, because this is what we do for a living here at PSP Metrics. So I appreciate that very much. But I think the important thing is to do what we call a talent inventory or talent landscape of the people that you already have in the organization. What strengths do we have? What shortcomings do we have? Nobody's perfect. We need to know where we're strong. We need to know where we need to get stronger on a person-by-person basis in the organization. So we think doing some kind of inventory of our existing people is really important. And then we can fill in as we hire more people. If we have gaps, we can fill in with those people. We use the same kind of instruments to screen people who are inbound, people who are trying to join our company, as we use with people who we already have on board. So really doing an apples to apples type of comparison. But we like to measure several different kinds of things. Now we think interviews are important too. We think it's important to know what a person has already achieved in their career. So those tools are still being used too. But the only real objective tools you have, the only tools that are ones where you can compare people to others, are tests. Now, not all tests are created equal, but there are different categories of tests that we would recommend for employers to use. One of those categories is to measure aptitude. What kind of ability, what kind of knowledge does a person have right now? What kind of ability do they have to learn more in the future? Okay, so aptitude would be one area to assess. We think work behaviors and work habits are really important to take a look at. We have ways of measuring those things in a very objective way. We need to know in our company if people can handle stress and pressure, if they're good time managers, if they can get along with other people in the organization. As I said a minute ago, if they're adaptable and reliable. if they have enough drive to kind of keep on going.
Hmm.
So those kind of behavioral qualities we think are very important regardless of what specialty a person is working in.
Yeah.
We have learned, obviously through our history with Dr. Fred Herzberg, that motivators are important. And
Mm.
so we are able to assess the kind of rewards and a person likes.
Okay.
And then you can decide if you have those motivators available in your organization.
Mm.
Uh, and so we're able to measure that as well. And then for managerial level people, we can measure their knowledge of how to supervise. We can measure their management style. So those are the
Mm.
main things that we can measure, and we can provide our customers and your listeners with those kind of tools to use in addition to the traditional methods of interviewing people and checking references and looking at
Mm.
resumes.
And so when you think about a tool like that, I mean, I know that, there's a number of organizations that still, either have never used assessment or maybe just haven't had, as great of an experience, maybe even using an assessment. And so can you talk through, I guess, you've clearly talked through some of the benefits, and I'm sure as you've been describing kind of I'll say the definitions, right, of things that we can identify within individuals, which I believe are powerful. Can you talk through a little bit about, kind of the hiring process, right? And so as organizations think about where is the best way to kind of, or place to identify those things, right? Is it, before you ever meet the person? Is it after you've already met the person and you just want to learn more about them, right? So like after a first interview, and maybe you can answer it in a couple of ways. One is maybe, what is the recommended, or is there a recommended time frame? Because you referenced like also using it potentially as like a development tool, or even just as a way to increase knowledge about existing employees. So do you find, as you're looking across markets, and you can even reference specific industries if you want, is there kind of a recommended place to assess, and if so, where is that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Donnie, and I think it's going to vary from industry to industry. I also think it's going to vary a lot with the level of the employee in the organization.
Okay.
And the amount of information that the customer, the hiring manager needs and wants. So, for instance, in manufacturing, when we're assessing people for hourly positions in manufacturing companies, we're fairly early in the game. We have low-cost tools that can be used to find out about a person's aptitudes or about their work behaviors, for instance. A test that may take an hour for an applicant to get through.
Sure.
They can do it online at their convenience anywhere in the world. And those kind of assessments generally are done fairly early, usually after the application is made, but before the first interview. And,
Got it. Okay.
if we're seeing a managerial level person, just to make a contrast, for instance, we would probably get involved in a midpoint in the screening process. Maybe after they've had one initial interview, maybe after they've done some background checking and things like that,
Okay.
and then they would like us to assess that person prior to the final interview, so they can drill down further on some of the things that emerge in the assessment, some questions that remain unanswered. For the executive level person, we're probably getting involved really late in the game. Probably almost the last thing that gets done at an executive level is an assessment like this, because those executive assessments are very time consuming. And executives' time, of course, is precious, as is everyone's time. But
Sure.
to make that kind of investment, which would also involve not just taking online tests, but also involved in an interview with one of our industrial psychologists here at PSP Metrics, feedback to that person about their own personal test results. For that kind of time commitment, that's usually something that's reserved for higher level and late in the game.
Got it. That is super helpful, my friend, just to, be able to walk folks through, how they should be thinking about it, and to be able to think about it not just based on the industry that they're in, but also the level of the individual. I think that's helpful, to kind of help folks think through that. I'll say that we're kind of winding down, our conversation today. I wish that we could, we might have to figure out a way to almost just have an education, kind of corner or tidbit, on talent on a monthly basis or something. Gary's talent corner. Maybe we can do it quarterly or otherwise, but. As you continue to think about the future, right? And so I kind of, referenced this earlier, but we know that, we're in a really unique time, right? And some of our listeners has heard me say, I really believe that we're living through what we're going to view as a black swan event. By 2030, looking back on this time, and it's catalyzed by a global pandemic, and here in the U.S., by some social unrest and some other things, and all of those pieces combined have just created a very unique time. That, frankly, as you think about workers and companies, and now people starting to come back into the office, and other folks have hybrids. Other folks have gone completely remote, right? How do you see? What is the role that talent kind of plays once again in this theme of building competitive companies, and how should companies kind of view assessment as potentially a let's just say kind of as part of their secret sauce, right? To identify, we know that people are going to be, seriously kind of the biggest competitive advantage that any company, can have. And so as you think about the future, how should people be thinking about talent, over this next, 5 to 10 years?
Well, I would say I'm glad you asked that question, because I've been thinking about that myself for our own company as well as for our customers. And here's what I've come down to so far, and this may change over time, but right now, here's what I'm thinking. I think right now, invest in people before you invest in technology. Okay? I'm a big fan of technology. Obviously, that's catapulted our business into territory we never thought we could get to. So technology is big, but the human element is bigger still. And so I think it's important that your listeners be reminded of that. They may know that already. But invest in people first, because as you just said a minute ago, they are the main competitive advantage. Everybody can get the technology, okay? Not everybody can get the people. So that's what really matters to me moving forward in terms of working with our own team as well as with our customers.
That's huge. That's huge. So invest in people before technology. In a technology age, I think that's sometimes a stretch for folks, but that is a powerful way to kind of end our conversation today. So Dr. Gary Williamson, my friend, colleague, just a pleasure to, kind of record, one of our conversations. We've had a number of them, over some time now. And so excited to continue having these in the future, but, really appreciate you for being on today. And taking the time. I know that folks are going to find some nuggets, as a result of you sharing today. And, for everyone else, hey, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. This has been the Only Dream Big podcast. We'll see you next week. If you like today's podcast, tune in to our social media to get updates on our next episode. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, at Only Dream Big Inc. And hit the subscribe button below.
That's all for today, folks. See you next time.